Under the same sun, we laugh, we run. Our world, our home, we share the air. Let's care for it, show we care. Under the same sun, let's show we care. Let's show we care.
Under the same sun. Hello and welcome to Under the Same Sun, where we talk about the environment, not as something far away, but as something we live in, breathe in, and depend on every day. I am Lois Apasambo. So take a look around you for a moment. Pure water sachet on the road, plastic bottles in the gutters, nylon bars flying around after the rain. Plastic has become part of everyday life in Nigeria because it is cheap, convenient, and everywhere. But here's the problem. It doesn't really go away. Today we'll be talking about plastic waste in Nigeria, how it affects our environment, our health, and how it connects to the bigger issue of climate change. Because most people think plastic pollution is only about dirty streets or blocked drainage, but the truth is plastic is also a climate issue. Our guest today is Ikechukwu-Iyk Onumah. He is a research-led entrepreneur with a keen interest in getting sustainable solutions to the plastic waste issues we have in Nigeria and, by extension, the world. Ike, you're welcome, and thank you for being with us on the program today.
Hi, Lois. It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
And before we begin the conversation, here's the sundial.
This is the sundial.
Did you know that Nigeria generates about 2.5 million tons of plastic waste every year, but less than 15% of that plastic is properly recycled? And in Lagos alone, an estimated 50 to 60 million used sachet water nylons are thrown away every day. So, where does the rest go? A lot of it ends up in gutters, rivers, dump sites, and streets, or gets burned in the open, releasing harmful gases into the air. Did you also know that plastic does not easily decompose? Some plastic materials can remain in the environment for up to 500 years before breaking down completely, which means the plastic thrown away today could still be here generations from now. Here's an interesting fact. Most plastics are made from fossil fuels like oil and gas. That means from production to disposal, plastic contributes to greenhouse gas emissions that drive climate change.
This is the sundial.
Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. And if you're just joining, this is Under the Same Sun and I am Lois Sambu. I still have here Ikechukwu-Iyk Onumah, a research-led entrepreneur with a keen interest in getting sustainable solutions to plastic waste issues. So, Ike, let's start with this, right? When we talk about plastic pollution in Nigeria, how serious is this problem really?
The problem of plastic waste or plastic pollution is as serious as our daily activities, in the sense that, so let's do a bit of data to it. It is said that Nigeria produces about 2.5 million tons plastics waste on a annual basis, and currently just the best numbers that have been decided or determined to be collected or is just 15% at best. So there's over 85% of plastic that goes into waste. And, when you look at that number, let the numbers speak for themselves. That is a very huge concern in Nigeria at this point.
That's huge. And looking at it, that's a problem. It's a problem and an obvious problem because I don't think there is any one of us that has not experienced the issue of some sort of gutter drainage, somewhere close to them, somewhere close to their office. And like I said, it's a physical and a tangible problem, right? But why should people bother about it?
Well, it's a case of a behavior, right? So we are products of our behaviors, and we see that our behaviors are beginning to hinder. So just for instance, a clear case I'd point at is what I noticed on my way here. So ever since I've got into this space, I've become a lot more conscious of what the environment looks like. And so on my way here, coming from a highbrow part of town, I mean, to be Asokoro to be precise, passing through Asokoro, there was just a very interesting point where a very function or a very graded road, a well graded road, was already being overtaken. The center of the junction was already being overtaken by sand and gravel and all of that. And then I was like, well, this is somewhere close to maybe the house of one of an influential person, and this person's drive in and out of that area, and so if that kind of behavior could be seen with sand, how much more plastic? We can only imagine the depth of impact it's having, because I mean it clogs our gutters, it impedes the flow and eventually brings degradation to already existing structures, creating more health challenges. Now it goes, when we come to the health aspect, there are a lot of things we could consider. Ever since, just a summary of it would be, ever since the whole plastic, we began using plastic in our regular activities, one sickness became known and became very paramount in our daily lives, and that's cancer. So when you think of that, that consideration will make you consider a second time our actions towards plastic.
Now you said cancer, and like you've alluded to our health, right? And um I know there has been a lot of advocacy, regarding, there is some sort of way that it contributes to the cancer burden. Is that something you want to elaborate on?
Oh, sure. So, we the understanding is the fact that plastics have the ability to seep in, into our consumables, right? So, for instance, you're using a chopping board as a plastic chopping board, and so the more you cut, even a wooden chopping board, you find out that over time, a chopping board, you would find out that the more you cut, at some point, the knife makes marks on that, and you never know, these things begin to seep into your food. And so due to the fact that it builds over time, you may never recognize that. And so when we look at it from a food standpoint, we also see, for that, to a significant extent, food is packaged in nylons, right? So whether at the low end or even in some higher ends, you find out, for instance, you just walk into an eatery. Of course, we can begin to see the consciousness around that, but we knew for a very long time the evolution of eateries brought about packaging, snacks in nylons, and these nylons are susceptible to heat, and being susceptible to heat, they begin to seep into what we eat, and we never know, even our water, bottles, sachet. I recently learned in the course of this research that most of the bottles of water, that the bottled waters we buy, they are made to be just one use. I learned this from one of the recyclers. They're supposed to be just one use, and so what that tells us is the fact that it's being reused for other situations point to the fact, it raises a question as to how safe it is. And so when we look at these things, we will never ever recognize the extent to which they form a problem, because I mean, cancer doesn't happen in one day. It's a product of lifestyles. I mean, every terminal ailment is a product of a lifestyle over a period of time, and due to the fact that we can't directly link these things, we cannot say, and with certainty, but that doesn't take out the fact that these things have been significant contributors. Well, there are research to show that they have been significant contributors.
So many people do not immediately, so many people do not even agree, and so many people do not immediately see a connection between plastic waste, our environment, and climate change. What's your thoughts on that?
Um, Plastic waste. Well, I believe we've already been able to clearly point what that means. But the climate change is a product of activities, our human activities, as we've understood. Now, if we take our minds back to 10, 15, 20 years ago, one of the things we began to hear was that the ozone layer was being depleted. That might pose a question or a doubt, but we know over the last, I mean, check the sun, the heat of the sun today, the sun rays today versus a couple of years back. I believe every one of us, it's quite clear to us. And so, plastic has its nature. and so it succumbs under heat. And definitely succumbing under heat, they release certain, they are made up of certain compounds which are quite toxic to human consumption, and so it is basically affecting not just humans but the environment, because I mean, the health of the environment basically forms the health of the humans, of human beings, right? And so as these things impact the environment, they take their toll on us as humans. We begin to feel the pain, the brunt of them. So plastic waste, the fact that we dispose things, with indiscriminately, they create an opportunity. Now that brings me to another point: burning of plastic, because that seems to be like the most outright approach to that. And the burning of plastics, that burning action, in its own way, contributes to the flares, and the gas that they release contribute in a significant way to, the depletion of the ozone layer and other terrestrial bodies that keep us, whole and in check.
You said something about, the fact that especially plastic bottles were made for one-time use, and we're seeing ourselves recycle. And because I know that over time there has been the advocacy for reuse, recycle before, you are eventually able to dispose of it. But for some of these single plastics now, what is now the way out for us? If it initially their intended plan was for it to be one use, that means we're going to have to be generating a lot of plastic bottles, right? And if we have so much of those plastic bottles, what is the way out for us in being able to tackle this plastic issue?
So speaking to the one use, or the single use rather, the whole idea of reduce, reuse, recycle it was like a gradation in helping us understand the need. So for instance, if you wake up one day and you say, due to the fact that we have built a habit over the years, and when I say over the years, as much as over the last 20 years, plastic has played a very significant role in our day-to-day activities. We built a habit over 20 years, 30 years, and so having to form that habit would also require a gradual, is a reversal process, right? So you build all the way up, and so to come down you still have to start from the top and down. So that I believe is the whole idea behind the reduce, reuse, and recycle. So as much as possible, try to reduce, and in moments when you can't reduce, try to reuse, right? And when you, as much as possible, try to recycle. So the ultimate or the best approach is to reduce as much as possible. But given the way we have evolved in our activities, we seem not to have, we seem to struggle with that, because it's it is what it is. But it is all something that's going to change in a day. It's going to take a while, but we also have to be conscious of the fact that we are moving at the speed, at a very fast speed, and so our willingness to adopt change has to also come at that speed.
So let's talk about solutions and what you've been doing so far. Tell us about, from your research and, even things you're beginning to do, some of the solutions that you're thinking of that you think can, help us with the plastic issues that we're experiencing.
Okay, so the work I'm doing with regards to this, for me, innovation has been very critical. So I look at situations and I'm like, what can we do to help this current situation? And so, um, having looked around over the last couple of years, I remember the first time I stumbled on that. I'd come to meet you at the early stage where you were even working on something in plastic in 2020, and so I was glad to see someone. Of course, I'd begun to think around plastic from about 2018, but how can we do better, to the point? It was so funny. Now I'll just share this as a back joke. It was so funny. I thought of, how about we create coffee cups that are chewable. So after you've drank the coffee, you chew the cup, or water cups that are chewable, just to reduce plastic. And so that was the initial point of thinking for me. And then in that time, I was working in the corporate world. I was in the FMCG space, so but over time, it became more, it became clearer, especially having seen what you were doing at that point, trying to recover plastic, adding to the solution at the time. It pricked my mind. And so in the course of the research, I took up a research work anyway. And for me, I was thinking, how do we better the situation? So a bit of research showed that a gap in the plastic value chain, and the value chain was not necessarily was about collection, plastic waste collection. And so the thought was, how do we now ramp up collection if only 15% is being recovered? It means that collection is an issue. And then, of course, what is the challenge? Behavioral, people's behavior, towards it, and or disposition towards it. So I thought, how do we go about this? So I decided to start an awareness slash incentive campaign. So the whole idea was, within a community. I chose a community here in Abuja, and then what we did was, how do we get people to begin to turn their eyes towards plastic collection? And so we did a bit of sensitization, spoke to people around, told them, this is what we need. We need you to gather your plastics for us. And the first feedback we got from people, both actively and inactively, was, there's no time to sort this thing. As in, I mean, if I collect my waste, I should sort plastic from that. And so we knew that the direct approach would not give any result. And the numbers showed, because for the first couple of weeks, we didn't get any plastic. Right. Okay, of course. So we decided to take it further. Okay, let's do the natural thing, which is begin to create some level of nudges. And so we engaged a couple of people, both the informal collectors, who we often call Babambole and the likes, we just engage them within the community. They just went around and they picked, the plastic waste and all that. And after that, we positioned plastic bins, so people saw that we were going beyond just advising or recommending to taking action. And so we are still monitoring the growth process of that. But the end product for us is to develop a sustainable solution that can be scaled, while we await the other aspect of things. Of course, be seeing what the government is doing, having been part of the public hearing on the single-use plastic ban, and all the government is doing. Why the government still structures how things would go, we are looking on the end of the consumers. How do we get the consumers to begin to take up responsibility, or to begin to consider it a noble act, beyond just doing it for the sake of instructions.
I know that it's a very big issue, and like you said, it's a behavioral issue, something that you have grown knowing that's how we behave, right? What are the ways that we can get people to even start reducing the amount of plastic that they use on a daily basis? Because plastic is convenient. It's one time use. It's not like, I know when we're growing, we used to use bottles, especially for soft drinks, right? They were bottles. So if you were going to buy, you had to look for an empty bottle to go, replace that one, collect another one. And, even for the sellers, for them to buy, they would have to give the companies back those old bottles to get, the new bottles filled with the content in it. If you didn't have it, you would have to pay for it. But then they started making plastic bottles, and plastic bottles were just grab and go. So it was very easy, it was very convenient for us. And so if we're saying that we want to tackle this plastic issue, it's almost like making it inconvenient for people. Well, how do we get to that point where we're able to get people to have that shift in mindset to, like you said, the best is reduce, right? Reduce the amount of plastic that they use.
Yeah, I agree with you that is going to be very inconvenient now, because we found a level of convenience with it, and so having to change that convenience, we have to, so rather than it starts as inconvenience until it becomes reconvenience, right? So we redefine convenience, and so every stakeholder would have to play a role in that. And so from the point, just starting with the example you gave about, the plastic bottles taking over from the glass bottles and all of that. If we recall, growing up, there were some marketing activities that were done by some of brands, including the soft drink brands, wherein you return XYZ or return a number of crowns to win a particular gift and all that. Now, for me, that is a very, from the aspect of the producers, the manufacturers, that's something that has to happen. So, um, producers have to begin to see there has to be some level of, return the bottles, return XYZ number of bottles. It has to be on a large scale. It has to be across board. So not just a campaign that happens on not just a campaign, not on a campaign basis, rather. It has to be an integral part of marketing. There should be some level of incentive on the parts of the manufacturers, right, for that. And that would support the recyclers and the collectors, so that's on the part on the large scale. Now let's bring it home to the basics and the individuals. Interestingly, I'd designed a story. There's a story series that I have been on. We've released the first episode. The next is about to come up, and what we did with the story was we told an everyday experience, right, of what it means. So let's think around it. We move around now. Even if you might say you're not a sachet water person, you're a bottled water person. Plastic is plastic, right? So you come in contact with plastic in one way or the other. And so let's think around the number of times we have to buy bottled water or sachet water in the day. We're generating plastic waste. It doesn't hurt to target the end of your consumption with a point of disposal. And so imagine if organizations now begin to intentionally have bins for collecting plastics, not just the general bins where waste is thrown. I'm talking about, these are in places where waste collection is even structured. And so in, let's say, every organization, there are bins that collect basically plastic. That is something that needs to happen, And then on the part of we consumers, as you consume, target that your eventual consumption. What I mean by that is, let's say you have a bottle of water with you. You drink the bottle of water, keeping that consciousness of, I don't need to just dispose this thing carelessly, would make you not be willing to empty the bottle completely, because the fact is, once it gets empty, it becomes light, and the next thing, it gets flung. Hold on to the bottle, don't consume the water. It's a very funny thing to say, but you know how there was this time wherein, to show that you're a big boy or a big girl, you just drank exactly, you just kept drinking the bottle of water, for an extended period of time. And so those actions, is now time to put those actions into good use, so it has its benefits. And so let's talk about food. When people buy food, let's say for instance, people who go to buy food, or even groceries, and you're giving nylons. So the first point of concern is, we know, we face the reality of the fact that the levels of nylons are getting weak. But the question to ask is, can I actually pick up this thing and put it in my main bag without having to take an extra nylon? Can I do that? If I can, then I should do that. If I can't, then when I get back home and I've taken out the content from it, so, and what do I do to the nylon? Can I intentionally, now growing up, a number of us, I saw this firsthand because it was an experience. And so there was a nylon bag in the kitchen that collected good nylon.
I still have it.
Exactly. So that habit, I think that was one of the things that that was one of the first actions I began to take. So when I get back, rather than just squeeze the nylon and dump it, I just keep the nylons, arrange them properly. At some point, what I started doing was I began to give back the nylons to petty traders, people who sold around, and just to encourage them and to help them save cost. And so that's, rather than just fling the nylon into the waste bin, keep the nylon for a second use. And if you think you don't have a second use, just keep the nylon, just keep keeping the nylon. We are also looking to build a number of recyclers in Abuja, in Lagos, in Port Harcourt. The awareness is getting larger, and these platforms already have digital apps where you can place orders for them to come pick up. We're also part of what we are trying to do, which we believe will be part of the solutions we'll come up with, would be to have an interconnected version. And so we just begin to keep just keep that consciousness and begin to take the conscious act of keeping the nylons, not just disposing it because you can, because we've also found that some of these things are being used to produce things like school bags, things that are needed in communities that are where the cost of living is high. And over within the next couple of in the next in a few months or weeks, a solution will be created where you can reach out to get the nylons collected.
That's great. I thank you very much. And so when we're talking about story, it just made me chuckle because on the program we have this segment we call Climate Story of the Week. So I'm going to read Amaka's story, and it just gives us perspective into how these things affect us. Because sometimes it just seems like we're just talking and talking. It's just all talk, right? And sometimes the reason why people don't take it serious because they do not see how it affects them. Amaka lives in Lagos, and and is expected every year in Lagos flood. So after every rain in her area, she already knows what to expect. Definitely flood water. And it's not because the rain is unusually heavy, but because the drainage near her street is almost always blocked with plastic bottles, sachets, and nylon bags. One evening, the water became so bad it entered her shop. Goods were damaged. She spent days cleaning up mud and dirty water. And what frustrated her the most of the waste causing the blockage were things people had used for only a few minutes before throwing away. So today, Amaka keeps a small bag in her shop where she collects plastic bottles separately instead of throwing them into the gutter. To her, it feels small, but after seeing flood water destroy her business, she says she sees plastic differently now because plastic waste doesn't just go away. It does not disappear. Eventually, it returns to affect all of us. And when we talk about this Amaka story, I remember even when we do advocacy for, plastic waste, what we say, and even waste generally, is just because you don't see it does not mean it has gone away. It has most likely just gone through a waterway and is going to wait for you in one gutter during the rainy season. And then when we begin to see a lot of this flood, that is where it's from, right? And Amaka's story is a reality that quite a number of people, and to even make it worse, Amaka is in Lagos, right? And normally when we talk about flood, is a lot of the time is associated with local areas, not highbrow areas. But in Lagos, I think it's even worse in the highbrow areas. All the islands, that's where they experience a lot of that flood. And I think this is a call for like a lot of people to put that into consideration. One, especially because in Nigeria our drainages are not even so good. But two, because the ones that are there and are available are already blocked. If it was normal food waste, they degrade. Do you understand? They eventually turn to sand and they can just pass. But the problem with plastic is they can stay up to 500 years. If you dig a hole, mark that hole and come back 500 years, dig up that hole, you still find it there. So it doesn't go away. Just because you don't see it does not mean it's not in the environment. I'd just like to get your view on one more thing before we end it on the program today. What are practical steps that people can take to ensure that they are part of the solution and not the problem regarding plastic waste?
We should become more conscious of thinking before we act. The wrong actions became our normal actions. Think before you make that purchase. If, for instance, you buy a sachet of water or you buy a bottle of water and you're going to be consuming it at the moment, why strive for an extra nylon? Now, the other thing would be when we now buy these things, and we come back with the plastic packages. In addition to your normal bin, just have a second bin where you drop plastic. I think that's like a very fundamental action on our part that we need to take. But like I said, if you also have to consume and you're on the go, how about you hold on to what you've consumed until you get to a place where you can dispose? It doesn't hurt.
Thank you very much. I sincerely appreciate you coming to be on the program with us. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure, and I really appreciate this. Well done.
Thank you. So plastic waste may seem ordinary because we see it every day, but maybe that's exactly why we should pay more attention to it, because the things we normalize quietly shape the environment we live in. Thank you so much for listening to Under the Same Sun. I remain Lois Aposambo, and join me again next week as we continue exploring connection between people, climate, and the world that we share.
Under the same sun, we laugh, we run. Our world, our home, we share the air. Let's care for it, show we care. Under the same sun, let's show we care. Let's show we care.
Under the same sun,